CraterWorks. My name is Taneea Browning and I am your managing partner here. And we're so excited that you joined us for Sparking Creativity. We have Brian Pike, our membership coordinator.
Hello.
And Ross Kellogg, our Shop Master.
Hi.
And we're going to be talking about creativity and how to spark it, how you found it, where to get it, and what to do with it once you have it. So, Brian?
All right, thanks, Taneea. So, like Taneea said, this is our Sparking Creativity vlogcast, podcast, interview style thing. So we're joined today with Ross, who's one of our shop masters here. If you saw last time, and if you haven't, I suggest you go back and watch the previous video we did with our other shop master, Rick Evans, on finding creativity and how everybody really is kind of a creative person in general. But today we're here with Ross, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into that and a little bit into Ross's process. So Ross, why don't you give a little background about yourself, where you come from, who you are and what you do here.
Yeah, so how far back should we go with his background? Like,
When were you born?
All the way. All the way.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, so I'm from Southern Oregon here, and I've been making stuff for a long time. My dad was a carpenter, so I spent a lot of time in the shop with him when I was a kid. And then I went to school for furniture design. I got a bachelor's of arts, fine arts, in furniture design from the Rhode Island School of Design. And then I came back to beautiful Southern Oregon here. And I now work here at CraterWorks as the shop master. I help Rick take care of the equipment, help people out with their projects. I sort of specialize here in the digital fabrication equipment. So any of the tools that have a computer that make them run. Yeah.
And you just did the bee thing. I mean, that's been a huge success. We started that off as kind of an internal project, and you designed that from kind of scratch and put it together and created little tutorials, and we were able to offer that to our students and then offer it to the community at large. So that's been a huge kind of success, I think. I think others would agree. It's super fun. So thank you for that.
Yeah. It's a good project. And if you haven't seen the bee project, it's on our Facebook. It's on our e-commerce page too. It comes in a flat pack kit, and it was completely designed by Ross, so people could take it home and make little houses for mason bees, which are important pollinators, which we just learned about. Cool. Ross is being pretty modest. Rhode Island School of Design is a pretty famous design school, right? Or it's a fairly well-known design school. And if you could go online and follow them kind of and see what they do. But Ross is really in my opinion, a pro designer, furniture maker. So Ross, in our discussions in this series of Sparking Creativity, why don't you kind of, what's your take on creativity and how it is? What's your kind of idea of what creativity is, but also how you go about cultivating it in your own style, in your own methods?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to put a definition on exactly what creativity is.
Sure.
But for me, I find myself finding inspiration like pretty much everywhere, but I also seek it out a lot. I'm really interested in the way things are made. So, I go on every factory tour that I can. I watch how it's made a lot. And, but I also go onto YouTube and I watch people who are skilled craftsmen doing things that I want to know how to do. And not necessarily that I will ever do, but having different ideas of how things are put together, how they're made, I think that really sparks ideas. For example, one of my favorite YouTube channels, something Creek Railroad. It's a model railroad channel. It's really interesting. It's this man, an Australian guy. He is an amazing model maker, and he shows you how he makes these models, HO scale models. And the crazy thing is, I don't think I've ever seen a train in any of his videos. He just makes the scenery. So I think my favorite one is he makes a palm tree, and it's just like the most realistic looking tiny palm tree you've ever seen. And you know, I've never made a model railroad scene. But it gives me ideas just watching that sort of thing.
So maybe we'll be making palm trees. Maybe we'll just randomly be making palm trees for little models that we don't have.
You never know when you're going to need a miniature palm tree.
Yeah.
I want one.
That's a really good point, because we talked about Rick and you know, we talked about with Rick in his take on creativity, in that you really have to kind of cultivate it. You really kind of have to build this this library almost of information, in like cultivate it in order to cultivate your creativity, right? So if you wanted to say build a farmhouse table, you need to know how to build a table. So you need to go back and maybe build a small model of a table, right? Because modeling used to be modeling is what like computer modeling is today, you know, physical modeling things, right?
Yeah, and I do often make models of furniture I'm going to make before I make it full size, just because you know it's a much cheaper way to make it than to mess up on a full size table.
Right.
And you have a model you just
book. Huh?
The stool that you just did. Yeah. You made that model. Yeah.
So this is model of a little stool. And so I made this with our laser cutter here at CraterWorks. And what's great about this is the finished stool is made on our CNC router. So the model is also made on a piece of digital fabrication equipment. So it's very precise, and it ends up just like this, but bigger when you make it on the CNC machine. So this is a fun way to make models, because I can actually make all the joints that it's going to have, and really tells you a lot about it. Like, is it going to stand up? Is it going to be stable? Do I like the proportions? But that being said, it's also important to make full-size mock-ups of things as well, especially things you're going to sit on. Like a stool is one thing. You know, if you get it the right height, like it's going to be okay. But a chair or a table, like you really want to be able to interact with them in person before you make them out of your final material. So like a mock-up chair can just be made out of some 2x4s and plywood, just to get the seat angles right and the backrest right, because you want a chair to be comfortable.
That's a really good. So this is like a really good segue into like maybe step us through your process. Like where do you start when you design a stool or a chair or things like that? Where do you start and how do you kind of follow along?
Well, what I've been doing currently is, so I have at home I have a big sort of drawing table I use, and I have a roll of paper. And when I start a project, I just start to draw and sketch out what I'm thinking. And I use a Sharpie on this roll of paper, and I draw big and fast. And I just keep iterating on the drawing ideas. And, you know, these are, you know, like, there's just sketches. They're coming out quickly. They're not, like, really refined. They're not proportional to, you know, I think a lot of people get stuck on the drawing thing as, like, oh, the drawing needs to look really good. And drawing is really about, it's not the case. Like, it's about communicating your idea to yourself or to someone else. And especially when you're communicating to yourself, like, it can look like anything as long as you are understanding it and it's helping you see things.
Yeah.
So I'll do that on this big roll of paper so I can just keep going. And when I find something that I like, I find I keep drawing it or trying to draw it. And usually I'll realize, I can't quite draw this the way I'm seeing it in my mind. And then I'll move to some sort of physical model because that will like help me see it better. And sometimes that's a digital like 3D model, and sometimes it's like with paper, or I just grab some scrap wood and sort of set things up before I move into more refined models, or really decide on, yes, this is what I'm making, and then move on from there.
So you're starting from a really wide, broad kind of idea of like a very rough sketch, and you're not even starting on a computer. You're starting on a blank sheet of paper, like literal sheet of paper.
Yeah.
So what's one of your favorite projects that you've worked on? And kind of like why? Why is it one of your favorites?
Well, I actually brought something in here to show you because I thought you might ask me something like that. So this is my giant push pin. So this project started when I was a freshman in college. I was it was sort of our foundations courses. It was just called 3D, I think. So it was like the sculpture course, but we had been given an assignment to make like an homage or a piece inspired by an artist. So we had to go do some, find an artist to do research on, and then make a piece sort of homage to them or based on their work in some way. So I chose Klaus Oldenburg, who you probably know his sculptures. He does a lot of large outdoor sculptures. The cherry on a spoon, the giant bow and arrow. I think he did a library in LA that's a giant pair of binoculars and like some books backed up.
Oh, I've seen that. I've actually seen that sculpture.
Yeah, so that was a collaboration with that architect, Frank Gehry.
Makes sense. And
yeah, I mean, you'll find his sculptures in big cities all over the U.S. Like he almost always is an object out of scale. It's something he's made giant. And that's what I knew him as before I started doing, research in this freshman class. And then, after reading books about him and, finding books written about him and by him, I realized that he also was really into performance art. And he did a lot of strange performances he would make things out of like, he made a whole orchestra out of like soft goods. So it was like floppy trombones and violins and like stuff. So he was also not playing just with scale, but also with material. So I wanted to do something that inspired me to make this thumbtack. So this is not my first version of the thumbtack. My first version was made out of foam and it was bright red. And I made about 6 or 7 of them. And I used those to tack myself to the wall for my critique. So I built a harness underneath my clothes, and I took one of the push pins and I drilled a hole in the wall, and I was hanging sort of like through my shirt like this, tacked up against the wall, my feet dangling, and then a sort of push pin scattered on the floor in front of me.
Did you find a stud, or what kind of wall? Well, it wasn't a drywall wall, was it?
No, so all the walls were just covered in push pin boards because we would pin up drawings everywhere. So yeah, I must have found a stud behind the wall, and the one I put myself on the wall with actually was a lag bolt. So I like put a lag bolt to the wall and then just slid the push pin over the top of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after doing that one, I had all these red foam push pins, and they weren't quite like the fidelity I was looking for. They were a little bulbous because it was an expanding foam, and it pushed on my rubber mold, and it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. So after that, when I started learning how to use a lathe, I was like, okay, that is how you should make a giant push pin. So I made one on a lathe out of a drone. And then I actually used this to make a fiberglass mold that I then cast them in concrete with. So I've got a bunch of these in concrete as well.
Great.
You know, and I have no idea what those are for.
Working out,
just,
making girls. and that's a really good point. Like, it doesn't always have to have like your creativity doesn't always have to have a purpose, you know. Like, sure, it's nice when you make a really nice table, but you know, it doesn't always have to have like a specific purpose right now, right? It can be an object that just exists in your life.
Yeah, you know, and this, I think the wood one I like better than concrete ones. Is a little more friendly, nicer to pick up. Sits on your shelf nicely.
I need one.
And it tells you, you know, it tells a story when you like, because someone's gonna ask you like, well, what is that for? And then, you know, I can tell them about the time I hung myself on the wall. But besides that, it doesn't really have a purpose. Besides, you know, the whole process of making it though was a really great experience. I learned a lot. You know, it was the first time I made a fiberglass mold. First time I kind of played with concrete. And sort of the earlier version, that was the first time I'd used expanding foam and that sort of thing. So I learned a lot of different processes just trying to make a thumbtack.
Right, yeah. And the learning process is really almost more beneficial than just like making the thing, right?
Yeah.
That's also a really good point, because we talked a lot about last time we talked with Rick a lot about, you know, finding inspiration kind of out in the world, out in nature, and that's a great source of inspiration. But also, like what you have done with this project, and I'm sure with many other projects, is gone back and see what's been done before. Like, can you talk about a little bit about you doing like research on you know, architects and designers and things like that? I'm imagining you've done quite a bit of that.
Yeah. You know, in school I took a lot of art history, art design classes, design history, which are all fascinating. And you know, I'm particularly interested in furniture design, so I have been amassing kind of a collection of books on, you know, design in the 21st century, and, you know, 500 chairs, and books on the Shakers, and books on, you know, the Memphis movement from Italy, and all these things that, you know, seeing them, yeah, it's a great source of inspiration to look at what other designers are doing in the past and the present.
George, to me, my mind goes to George Nakashima, and Nakashima's, because he wrote quite a few books, I think. He was a pretty famous furniture designer, architect.
Yeah, I actually got to go when I was on the East Coast. I went to his studio, which is still run by his daughter, and they still make these beautiful live edge tables, and they're still using the wood that he picked out personally. Like, they have a whole warehouse full of slabs that he had chosen to be his tabletops. Man. And they're still out of them.
I want that slab and that slab and that slab and that slab and that slab.
Well, that's so great, you know, Ross. And I think one of the things that's really awesome about kind of what you've brought to CraterWorks for us is that support, right? So when people come in and they have a project, they have this idea, and maybe they're stuck a little, or they want just kind of a reassurance on process, you know, you're able to give like additional insight. It's not like you know everything, or that anybody here knows everything, but we all have this different view of how someone might approach this particular, you know, problem that they're trying to solve. Rick had mentioned that really being artistic is about the art that you bring and the challenges that you kind of faced with as you're designing something and putting something together. So super excited that, you know, we have all of these kind of resources here along with the tools so you can prototype and test it out. And what is the project that you
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. I would say it's just, you know, it's not just me and Rick who are here to like help people figure out their projects. It's everyone who comes here, like
Yeah.
being able to talk to other people making things, seeing what other people's projects are. It's that's kind of the great thing about CraterWorks. You get to interact with other people making things, and they're going to have another idea of how you should make that, which is very beneficial.
Yeah. To digress just ever so slightly, I was actually talking to one of our volunteers here yesterday, and big shout out to our volunteer staff who comes in and helps us out on maintaining the space, doing stuff, and being here for customers. But she was talking about a project that she's working on that she actually has to she wants to scrap it. She's not happy with how it's going, and it's gotten to that point where it says, okay, let's start over again. And she was telling me, like, it's so nice to have this space because, you know, you can go really negative when you're building something, and you can get really in your own headspace and say, like, oh, this isn't going well, I can't do this, and you just say, you know, just drop it together. But she was saying that, you know, having CraterWorks here and people saying, like, no, don't just totally abandon it, you know, work through it, iterate it, you know, start, yeah, maybe you do have to start again, but now you've learned this entire process, you know, and have had kind of a safety net, if you will, with you, Ross, with Taneea here, kind of like captaining the ship, and Rick and all the volunteers that we have going here. Like everybody can kind of come together and say, like, shoot ideas out and kind of go in all these different directions and say, like, oh, well, use that wood, use a different kind of wood, or use a different kind of plywood or something like that, or kind of iterate. You have an opportunity to, like, fail safely, if you will, here, you know, where you can not necessarily, like, achieve your goal, but, like, you know, realize what went wrong and then try and redo it, which is a really important process. That just reminded me, that whole conversation just reminded me of, like, the conversation I had yesterday. So I just was gonna digress into that, but.
I think that's super, super valid because I'm like the novice. I love how you included me, Brian, and, you know, Ross, as a resource here, even though I am limited, you might say, in my experience. You know, I feel like the projects that I want to do, I'm going to have someone help me in, like, seeing kind of my vision and then saying, oh, well, have you thought about doing this? Well, what about this? If you change this, you know, material and couple it with this, and let's look at those ratios. And then it becomes also something bigger than just my idea, right? And so then when I look at that project that's on my wall, it's no longer like, hey, that was an old picture frame that I restored. You know, it was like, oh, remember that conversation that I had, and we talked about this, and we joked about this, and we laughed, you know, and there's so many interactions that build the piece that you're working on, that it's no longer just a thumbtack, or it's no longer just a corkboard. It's this experience that you had with people connecting into this space and creating. And that, I mean, those are the stories that I want to have kind of in my life. And that hopefully, you know, we're going to be able to support that, you know, more and more as we kind of move forward with our programming that we have, and then getting stuck, you know, stuck in that spot, that creativity. I know we want to kind of wrap it up a little bit, but, like, Ross, what do you do, or what if you get stuck in a process? Like, do you take a break, you go do some jumping jacks, do you have a sandwich? I mean, what go to another project? What do you recommend for people to do if they're kind of in that funky spot where they don't know what to do in their project?
I guess it's like, if they don't know what they're trying, like what they're building, or they're building something and they've come to a problem, like, you know, you going for a run, it's very helpful.
Okay.
Just some time to think about it. Sometimes, you know, I actually often think of, you know, I'll wake up with a solution to a problem I've had. So.
And what about
the old adage, sleep on it, right?
Yeah.
So, and one of my favorite projects, only because you kind of helped curtail it to fit kind of what I wanted, was your cookie cutter that you made, right? And so you had this idea, and then kind of walk us through that, because that was pretty incredible. I didn't see it on the radar at all, and then I show up. And I'm amazed.
Well,
I'm like, oh my gosh.
well, that actually sort of came from one of our members who was taking a 3D printing class. I was asking them about what they wanted to do with the 3D printer, and one of them said, "I want to make cookie cutters." And I was like, "That is maybe the best thing I've ever heard to make with a 3D printer, because it is, it will make a very good cookie cutter, and it's really easy to do." So during that 3D printing class, we actually, we pulled out Tinkercad and showed like, okay, if we wanted to make just a simple heart cookie cutter, this is what we would do. And so then after the class, I was like, wow, that I should probably do more cookie cutters. I thought, I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I was like, I'll make an instructional video on making the cookie cutters so that this member will definitely remember how to do it, what we talked about in class. So I'm still going to do that in the future. And then I just, started making cookie cutters. So I made a couple tools. I made a wrench and a saw.
And the one you did for me, I mean, it was incredible, because it's like anything you can, and I think that's the part about CraterWorks that amazes me, is it's whatever you can think of, you can do. So I was like, oh, my husband, like, he's a sprinkler guy. Like, he does, fire protection sprinklers. That's his gig. But there's nowhere on the planet that you're going to find a cookie cutter of a sprinkler head, except here. And
Super custom.
Super custom, and I got some major points. So it's just it's endless, and it blows my mind. I mean, I know that we've been here for a while, and we've watched kind of CraterWorks kind of grow up over this last year. But I'm just super impressed with the ability of our staff and our stewards and our members, and the way they support each other in this whole creative process. So I just thank you guys both for joining us today and at CraterWorks. Did you guys have any parting words that we should leave our audience with?
Breaks are important. Breaks are important. I think we get kind of like stuck in this idea that we always have to be doing stuff and making things and making it happen. But I'm a big believer in that in my design in my design process and other processes in my life. Breaks are important. Taking a minute, taking a coffee break, or saying like, I'm done with this for a week. I'm gonna come back to it, and I'm just gonna let my subconscious kind of chew on things.
Yeah, and then you can see it with new eyes, and it might look totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Brian. We want to ask people to post questions, what they're designing, what they're working on, creative sparking happening. Yeah,
so we would love for you guys to like the video, share it with your social circle, wherever you're finding this, on Facebook, Instagram. Share it around, throw us a like, and comment down in the comment section. Let us know what you're working on. Send us pictures. Send us even if it's just a sketch. Just take a little quick picture of your sketch and what you want to build. Seeing that stuff. We love engaging with the community. And Taneea, what you got?
Well, nothing. I was just gonna say, and like, what are you thinking right now? Who you just watched this, and what are you thinking right now? Just one word. What are you thinking, and how are you feeling? Ish. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ross. Thanks, Taneea.
Bye.